I was seriously contemplating on doing yet another video on the whole VAR incident from Sunday's game. We've now seen a million different angles of what went on in the penalty box. Trossard not looking at the ball and trying to pull Pablo down. Gabriel pulling the same player's shirt. Rice rugby tackling Somerville and Dinos way before the Raya incident as well. Souček being pulled down by Havertz. Several shouts for a penalty. Having now seen the conversations that were ongoing between VAR and the ref got to see just the incidents on the keeper, but dismissed all the other incidents as not being important. And why was that? Because Darren England and Kavanagh throughout this season have been making mistake after mistake after mistake. You know, and then the way Darren England was talking was really pushing the narrative on looking at the Raya incident only. And it was only because of the VAR assistant asking the appropriate question of how would they explain a decision to disallow the goal without looking at all the other incidents that it was even mentioned. But it wasn't on Kavanagh's agenda, and it certainly wasn't on Darren England's agenda, who pushed one narrative. Look at the incident on Raya and nothing more. But look, you know, it's over. I haven't changed my mind. It's still a bad decision, no matter what the experts say. But if it was the right decision to disallow the goal on Raya, then we should have had a penalty. We should have been awarded a penalty for what went on up to that point, because they were relevant. Look, the one thing I've got to say I have changed my mind on it. It's not cheating, but it is gross incompetence. And the officiating this season has simply not been consistent. We've seen so many examples of Arsenal doing exactly the same thing to other clubs and getting away with it, getting goals. And the problem is, especially with Darren England and Chris Kavanagh involved, both of them, in my opinion, should be stripped off Premier League duties as refs, as well as overseeing VAR for a lengthy period of time. Is it right that Darren England is going to be reffing the FA Cup final? Good luck there. But the PGMOL are standing their ground because they've got no choice but to do so. If they make yet a further apology for yet another error, their already awful credibility, well, they don't have a credibility, will be in even more tatters, and West Ham United will indeed seek financial compensation if we do go down. So having said all that, I'm actually really glad another story broke out on Wednesday, which can take my head away from this feeling that I've got, because I'm still upset over it, and I'm sure many West Ham fans are still upset over it. And I needed something to take the disappointment of Sunday away, to enable me to focus on something else. But before I tell you what that is, I would like you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. A QR code has appeared in the top corner there. You click on that, it takes you to the subscription page. Subscribing is free of charge, costs nothing to subscribe. And you'll be able to watch more content if you enjoy this particular show. And if you like this show, there's a like button below there. There's a hype button as well. Please click on those as well. So, what's the latest story that's revitalized my thinking? Well, it's going back on what I was going to talk about a month ago. I actually prepared a video about a month ago to talk about the director of football, the appointment of a director of football. And the story that came up today kind of reminded me of that. I went, oh yeah, why don't I talk about that? But a director of football, we've been here before, haven't we? More times than we all care to remember. And the latest name is a little bit left field. Enter one Paul Wagner, or Wagner, should I say, in German. Up until earlier this year, he was the head of scouting and squad planning for Dynamo Dresden, a club who play their football in Bundesliga 2. He's been praised for his enormous expertise in analysis and scouting. He's got a wide network for someone so young, and also a deep knowledge of Dresden's academy. He takes note of the academy and how best he could use it in the role he had. And in 2020 to 2023, he was part of the recruitment team that helped Dresden to climb from Bundesliga 3 to stable mid-table position in Bundesliga 2. Now, he left Dynamo Dresden in March 2026 and he's currently on gardening leave. His contract expires this summer and he is attracting interest from West Ham United, Hannover 96, and a number of other Bundesliga clubs. He is known as an expert in data scouting. He's considered a rising figure in German recruitment circles. And with Max Hahn already being at West Ham United, many of us thought he might have left by now. But Max Hahn is still there. And with Max Hahn overseeing our new data-driven scouting system that is being built by Amazon Web Services and an AI company called Crayon, could this be the perfect time to bring someone like Wagner to the club? Maybe, but many might think it might be a gamble. Look, like I said, Wagner's strengths are data-driven recruitment. He's repeatedly described as an expert in data scouting. He possesses enormous expertise in analysis, and he's able to view, because of that, football from many different perspectives. This aligns with modern recruitment models used at other clubs like Brentford, Brighton, Bournemouth, as we've seen. They all do enormously better than we do, and there's a consistency about them. And other clubs like Leverkusen, Stuttgart, to name a few. And like I mentioned, he's got a strong network for his age. Multiple sources highlight his extensive network, his deep insight into youth development, and how he mixes those two to get the best for Dresden, or when he was getting the best for Dresden when he was there. And he's also got a proven track record in a difficult working environment. Now, Dynamo Dresden have always been on a limited budget. They've got high fan pressure to do well, and there's frequent structural instability. I'm laughing because that sounds very much like West Ham United. Yet Wagner contributed to their promotion from 3 to Bundesliga 2. Now, if you want to focus on any potential weaknesses, then you can look at the fact that he's extremely young. He's only 27 years of age. And if he was appointed, he'd be the youngest director of football in Premier League history by a huge margin. That's, of course, if we stay in the Premier League. It's probably likely he'll be the youngest director of football in the Championship if we recruit him. Now, he has no experience. If you want another weakness, he has no experience in a big league. All his experience has been gained from Dynamo Dresden in Bundesliga 2. So he's got no exposure to big budgets, Premier League agents, Premier League pressure. Mind you, as I've already just said, if we get relegated, he still won't have exposure to all that. Now, look, it's understood. He left Dresden because of a difference of opinion over what direction the club should be heading. And of course, he's never held the post of a director of football or anything similar to that. But one could argue, you've got to start somewhere, so why not recruit him at West Ham United as a director of football? But even if it was to be Wagner, why doesn't a DOF work at West Ham United? Well, we all know the answer to that, don't we? It's pretty simple. That's David Sullivan. He cannot keep away from player transfers, and his agent mates are always in the background, constantly going on at him, giving him misguided and misleading information as to why a DOF won't work at West Ham and why Sullivan should stick with them when it comes to player bargains in the transfer window. Well, a fat lot of good that's done us over the years, because we're now facing relegation in the face. Or staring relegation in the face is the thing I was meant to say. Sullivan can't help himself, can he? David Sullivan and the likes of Siltman, Sorthouse act as leeches to a man who they know is too weak to say no. But we all know what needs to happen at West Ham, and I'm sure by now David Sullivan should know, and so should his agent mates. West Ham must absolutely appoint a properly empowered director of football and give that person a real chance to work. Regardless of which league we're in next season, that's what we need. We don't need a figurehead. We don't need a short-term experiment. We need a real director of football with authority to make decisions that he or she would deem fit for the progress of this football club. But is Wagner the right person at this time? Working in Bundesliga 2 under tight constraints that I've mentioned, especially budgets, etc., he might well succeed if we get relegated in the championship. Bundesliga 2, all right, you're going to say, Bundesliga 2 is, won't be anything like the championship, and the Bundesliga is nothing like the Premier League, and I'll take your point. But quite possibly, if we are relegated, coming in because we're going to have tight budgets, he might well succeed in the Premier League if we do get relegated. And this appointment could be the making of Wagner. Help West Ham win promotion at first time of asking would enhance his reputation immensely. But not only would Wagner have the pressure to get West Ham back up to the Premier League, he'll have to be dealing with the politics that are going on in the background as well at West Ham United. I've already mentioned Sullivan's uncontrollable desire to get his oar into transfers, but the club is a terribly complex political circus. David Sullivan's interference, the apparent increase in interest from Daniel Kaczynski, we don't know how that's going to work out. The constant rumours of takeovers, buyouts, etc. We need a new manager, or we may need a new manager if Nuno leaves, if we get relegated. We'll undoubtedly need to rebuild a brand new squad as well. And of course, the fan base, who will wonder whether Sullivan is doing the right thing by appointing such a novice to a crucial role. And many fans will immediately point to the fact that Wagner will come cheap because he will soon effectively complete his gardening leave from Dresden and be a free agent to join West Ham. So no compensation payment from Sullivan there. A director of football is going to need authority. He's going to need to be a decision maker, and he's going to be allowed to dictate. He needs to be allowed to dictate the direction of football at this club. Now, before she left, and by the way, good riddance, Karen Brady stated in what was her last chairing of the FAB meeting, Fan Advisory Board meeting, that we will indeed be returning to the model of a director of football, and after much speculation, with claim and counterclaim that it won't happen, it has been repeated that indeed we will be recruiting a DOF at the end of this season. But why wait till the end of the season? Well, I think it's quite possible West Ham have already earmarked an individual for that role, and that individual is still working at another club. But come this summer, that individual will be free from his contractual duties and ready to take up a new role at West Ham. And technically, that fits Wagner's current situation. Look, we all know that David Sullivan will not pay anyone to be taken out of their existing contract. Mind you, he did do that with Carl McCauley, only to sack him later in the same season. The thing that worries me about the recruitment of a director of football is, if it looks like it's not going to reap immediate reward, Sullivan will be tempted to jump in and probably sack Wagner or whoever our director of football will eventually be. Sullivan makes knee-jerk decisions by sacking those in place before plans can take root, before plans can start to materialize. The result? Squads are built around a manager's immediate needs and not a club-wide long-term philosophy. The cycle is toxic. When a director of football is undermined, recruitment becomes reactive. The club signs players then just to please a manager for quick fixes at that time. When the manager leaves, the squad and the ethos leaves with them. We saw it under Moyes, it happened under Lopetegui, it happened under Potter, and if we retain Nuno, it could happen under him too. And the roller coaster, that kind of approach kills continuity, it kills identity, and it kills long-term progress. And as I mentioned a moment ago, you've only got to look at the likes of Brighton and Bournemouth and Brentford to see how well a director of football process can work. Now, some fans have suggested that a director of football role in English football doesn't work. We're not structured in the same way as clubs abroad. Nonsense. I've just mentioned 3 clubs that are doing exceedingly well through that process. Now, what a director of football must be given at West Ham is a blueprint that can actually work at West Ham. A blueprint that's agreed with the owners, the OF, coach or the manager of the club, something they all agree on and they all buy into. Also, a clear line of responsibility has got to be agreed, not this half-measured approach that happened between Moyes and Steiden when they were both at the club. The director of football must be given explicit responsibility for recruitment, a scouting structure the ability to negotiate player contracts, and the development pathway for academy players to go into the first team. Now, you put all that remit in a contract, make it public enough to create accountability. Sign the director of football to a multi-year contract with proper milestones, proper KPIs, and a fair dismissal process that will require board approval. No instant sackings just because of a bad window or a rough patch of bad results. But the other problem here, and we're all aware of this, is that Nuno is also his own man. He had a fallout with Nottingham Forest over how player recruitment was going to be managed, and according to reports, didn't see eye to eye with Edu, who Evangelos Marinakis recruited last year as a DOF there. His criticism was quite public. So how will Nuno react to the recruitment of a director of football if he stays at West Ham United? Look, I've already said, if we get relegated, it's believed he's not going to stay anyway. And there's a lot of talk about Scott Parker potentially being the new manager next season. But if we stay up, it'll be interesting to see what Nuno does. We've got to move away from this short-termism approach, which has gotten us into the mess that we're in now. Get the recruitment of players right, and we stop spending money on the wrong kind of signings, wasting money, losing money when we got to get rid of them on the cheap because they don't fit what we need. But we can also perhaps start making money on player recruitment when we sell players for a profit in order to recruit more players, better players with those profits. Will we get it right? I don't know, to be honest with you. We haven't got it right so far. And will we get it right this time round? I hope so, because if we do get relegated, it'll be vital that we have a good director of football and a decent data-driven analytical scouting system in place to give us a great chance of instant promotion back into the Premier League. But honestly, I'm not really holding my breath.